Well, welcome, Marianne. We have with us today Ann Flug, whose maiden name is Weigel, and she has agreed to be part of our interviews that the society called The Germans from Russia are doing. It's our oral history project. My name is Lorene Marshall. I'm going to be asking questions of Marianne as we go through the next short while. And the date today is October the 21st, 2017. Marianne, when we had our little visit last week, we talked about your family and their origins in Germany. Would you like to tell us something about that to begin with?
In Germany, Alsace, Germany, they left there in 1808 and went to Selz, Odessa, Russia. And that's, as far as I know, that's the only place that they lived in Germany. I haven't researched Alsace, but I can.
And the place in Russia was South Russia?
South Russia.
And say again, please?
Selz. It was Selz, S-E-L-Z.
Thank you.
And it was 1808 when they arrived there, along with hundreds of other people.
What can you tell us about that time in their lives?
That time in their lives? They needed to leave because there was no land left for them, and South Russia offered them free land, free farmland, and it's really good land. They didn't know that, but they prospered there. They prospered there. For my Weigel family was there for 92 years.
And were they merchants, or what was their...
They were farmers.
They were farmers.
But they were also tradespeople, because that's what Russia was looking for. They didn't want just farmers. They wanted tradespeople to come and teach their people how to farm, how to build things.
So that you say they prospered.
They did. They did prosper.
Did they stay in one location?
They did. They stayed right where they were.
And what was it near, just for those of us that aren't as knowledgeable about the geography there?
It was 30 miles north of Odessa, Russia, which I found out to be a huge city. I thought it was a small little town. There's millions of people there and have been for a couple of hundred years.
I think this is where I should mention that you made a trip there last summer.
I did.
Tell us about that.
The second 2 weeks of May, I went with the Germans from Russia, Fargo, North Dakota University, and this was their 21st trip. And they had sent us an itinerary before we went, so we knew exactly what we were going to do for 2 weeks, where we were staying, what we were doing. It was 10 times better than anything I imagined. Anything I imagined. And the villages were as organized and efficient and wonderful as I knew they would be, because that's how our farmers were. Like my parents and their parents and their parents, and the villages that I saw in books, like how efficient their houses were that they built there, you know?
And so on your tour, was it organized so that families knew that you would be visiting them?
There was one family that knew we were going to be there, and she fed all of us lunch, Louisa Risling, and she's been doing this for years. So she was the only one, as far as I know, that knew we were coming. But I think the whole village knew we were coming, because they have put up a monument, a granite monument, with their own money to the Germans who left. And so I would imagine they were told that we were going to be there. I don't know.
Well, is it part of tourism from their point of view, or?
No, I think they're just so grateful for what they inherited and sad that of what happened to us. Mm-hmm.
Well, they would have family members that have come to the New World, so to speak, would they not?
To the New World as in?
Canada and the U.S. when they emigrated.
Oh, I'm sure there would have been some.
Mm-hmm.
There would have been some. Mm-hmm.
So, your family was farming
Mm-hmm.
near the town of, say again, please?
Selz. It's S-E-L-Z.
S-E-L-Z.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
And it was bigger than you ever dreamed.
Oh, absolutely. Not the villages. The villages were about the way exactly how I expected them to be, because I've seen it in books,
Mm-hmm.
many books that have been done by the university.
Well, you had already done some family history, had you not?
I did 2 books on my own, the Weigels and the Bischoffs, my mom's family,
Mm-hmm.
and I helped with my husband's family, the Flugs, just helped with that
Mm-hmm.
one. And there was a couple of people that started me on this journey. I wouldn't have been able to do as much as I have had they not done this first book, a history of the Stoppler, Weigel, and Kessler families. These people all went to South Dakota, and half of them stayed there in South Dakota, and the other half came to Canada
Mm-hmm.
because they'd run out of land, homestead land that they could get.
Okay, well, if we can stay back in Russia just for a moment more.
Okay, sure.
So tell me more about what impressed you on that trip that you saw. What was the highlight?
The cleanliness, the efficiency, everything was done to a really high standard.
Even in the smaller villages?
Yes. Like their homes were like there was no garbage around. Their homes were all organized. We got to go into some of the, not inside the houses, but into the yards.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like really well taken care of, which is what I thought they would honor. I can't imagine how they felt being able to just take over a whole, like those lots are like 300 feet long, if not more,
Mm-hmm.
and they contain a house and a kitchen, where they did all their work, an orchard going all the way back, and everything was right there. Chicken coops.
So how modern were the villages?
Well, they all had running water and indoor plumbing, and so they've done all that for them.
And so, Marianne, the information about the villages and how modern they are, you said they all have electricity, indoor plumbing,
Mm-hmm.
and the plots that they have is what you were telling me about. So, kitchens, the house, the kitchen, the orchard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they were able to do a lot for themselves. They're like, the huge vegetable garden, the chickens, and then they farmed together. Like no one had their own separate plot. They all went farming together, and then they shared the crop. And I can't imagine how they would figure that out. Probably, per family.
So it would be like a communal effort?
It was. So it would have been an extreme shock when they came to North America and they were plunked onto the middle of a quarter section and they had to live by themselves and work by themselves.
And so I'd like to just ask again about the monument you mentioned a few moments ago, about the celebration of the Germans. That the monument was in Russia, was it not?
Oh yes, it was in the village of Condal, I believe, in Condal or Selz. The monument is up on a hill. Condal is up on a hill by the cemetery, and there's still stones all over. There's no names on them, just big stones. And I don't know if somewhere they have a record of, whose stone.
Do you mean gravestones?
Gravestones, yeah.
Okay.
They're just a big boulder.
And the monument itself, what does
It's on the edge
look
of
like?
It's on the edge of the property, and it's black granite. It's probably over 5 feet high. Oh yeah, it's about 6 feet high and square, and it's on a 7 by 7 piece of granite, and it's got a chain wire around it. And Fargo, North Dakota, when they heard about it, they started saving money too for this. But the Ukrainians said, eventually they said, we have enough money, like the Ukrainians collected enough money to do that. It's a lot of granite. And so Michael Miller said when we were there that they could pay for the chain link fence that went around the outside, because that hadn't been paid for yet.
And so what was on the monument?
There was a prayer. There was different names on there. I would have to. I've took pictures of it, but I don't know German, so they had it in German. The prayer was in German.
And you mentioned somebody by the name of Michael Miller. Can you tell us who that is, please?
Michael Miller has been with the University of Fargo, North Dakota, and right now, this month, they're celebrating his 50th year there. And he's just absolutely devoted to the Germans from Russia. I don't know what else he does there at the university, but that's his main thing. And he, along with his new sidekick now, Jeremy, they work for a whole year on this tour.
Okay, so he organizes the tours.
Right, and up until this year, he did it all by himself. 20 tours he did by himself. And this year, Jeremy was a really big help to him.
Those younger legs.
Yeah. Hotels and food and buses and tour guides, and we never had to worry. When we landed in Berlin, we never had to think again about where we were going or what we were doing. They handled everything, and it was all done so good.
Well, that's must have been a really wonderful trip for you. And so now I want to talk about another trip, and that would be the Weigel family's trip to Canada. What can you tell us about that?
Well, their daughter, the Weigel's daughter and son-in-law, went to South Dakota about 5 years before they were able to come, and they sent some money. I was reading in my book here, and I had forgotten about that, but they sent some money for them to come over, and all their 8 of their 9 children came over. It was Anton and Rosina Weigel came over, and their one son died over there, and so they came over by ship. And
what year was it?
1900. 1900. And so they were established down there until 1910.
And I think you told me earlier that they came to Ellis Island initially?
Right, they did. That's where they came through.
Okay.
They came through from Ellis Island. And they didn't just, for many years I thought that they walked down those, I think they're I can't remember the name of the steps, but I thought they walked down the steps and got onto a ship. But no, that's not the way it is. Those steps aren't even on the river. They had to, all of them had to steal their way out of the country, and my mom talked about that so much that if they'd have caught the men, they'd have shot them. So
That's what your mom said.
She said that they always went at night, at night, and they always went as a group, like they would have it all planned out ahead. And they would leave in the night and travel all night, and then stop once they got far enough away that they thought they were safe. And it was quite a long haul. Like they got onto a ship, I think it was in Bremen, Germany, so they were on the road for a really long time.
So they went on foot from Russia to Bremen, Germany?
Well,
right.
they, with their wagons and stuff. But yeah, so really a long trip before they even got on the boat.
Right, and then to Ellis Island. And then one of the Dakotas, which one was it?
South.
South Dakota? Okay, so where did they arrive in South Dakota?
Well, they didn't arrive, they ended up in Bodle, but I believe they arrived in Aberdeen, which is, just right close there, because all 8 of the children and the parents stayed within the same area helping each other. And yeah, so 4 of the children are still down there, like the descendants are still down there.
So you have family there?
I have, and I've never met any of them, but I do have their faces in this book.
So you, your own mother probably, she was in South Dakota also?
No.
Or your grandmother?
My grandmother.
Okay, so did you know your grandmother?
I did.
And did she tell stories about her time in South Dakota?
She didn't talk barely at all, and now I know why. I absolutely know why, because she had a farm in Selz, Odessa, Russia. She had a farm in South Dakota. She had a farm in Cronkerville, Alberta, which is Etsicum, Whitlaw. She had a farm in Saskatchewan, like that they created. And that poor woman, like she was walking around in a black dress, the same black dress. She maybe had 2 or 3 of them. She didn't talk.
Things were different in those days. And what about your grandfather? Did he share any stories?
He died when he was just 50-some, so I didn't get to meet him. My grandmother lived with us for a while.
Okay.
So I got to know her.
And Grandpa passed away in South Dakota, or?
No, in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they obviously decided they're going to go north. Do you know what stimulated that move?
To go north?
Yeah, from the Dakotas to come to Canada.
Oh, yes, because all the homestead land was gone. And the land that they could have had wasn't any good. And somebody from Alberta came down and told them about this wonderful land that was free for homesteading in Alberta. And so half of them went, and that's what I know from my families, both of my families, like my mom's and my dad's, is that because they had such big families and they stayed together and just helped each other with everything and played together, worked together, played together, went to church together.
So they were their own social entity, so to speak, a group that were helpful to each other. Right. No nuclear family back in those days. They were helping each other.
Oh, yes. Okay. So that grandma only had 2 farms, the one in Condal, Odessa, Russia, and then the one by Fox Valley, Saskatchewan. And the difference between the 2 grandmas was huge, because the one that moved right to Canada and just was able to, go on to her first farm and just stay there, she was impeccably dressed and made cookies and
she could
was happy. She thrived. Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
She did.
Those women back in those days were amazing, were they not?
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine all the stuff they did.
Well, now we're in Canada.
Okay.
And you mentioned to me that your family, there were people that came initially to the Dakotas and then brought others over. So it's in a way, it wasn't exactly sponsorship like a church would sponsor a family, but the families were bringing each other over, weren't they, at some point?
Yeah, they did. They did.
Okay, I'm going to move on, Marianne, and talk about your family's history in this area. So you told me that they moved here near Etzicum? Okay, what can you tell me about that?
Well, they were only there from 1910 to 1923. And they didn't leave for the reasons that they left the other places before. They left because their first children were five girls. And then when they moved to Etzicum, all of a sudden along came the 4 boys. And one of the very oldest daughter married somebody from Saskatchewan. Somebody had said to this fellow, you know, go find her, and he took her back to Saskatchewan. And then the other ladies followed.
So the grass is always greener on the other side?
Well, the
sisters,
sisters went to Fox Valley to help their sister. And then my grandma and grandpa were alone with these 4 little boys. So they thought, well, we might as well go. So they went to the prairie. I mean, a dry prairie, but they prospered.
And where did they land in Saskatchewan?
It was 11.5 miles north of Fox Valley, which a lot of people say they were from Fox Valley. And that was it was a small little place, but that's where they went.
Was it good land?
No, it was, they managed to grow, so I guess you could say it was, but they didn't have enough rain. So they went through the dirty 30s, and so my dad and his 6 children at the time had to move to Medicine Hat because there was no money, there was no food.
So they moved to Medicine Hat in order to have jobs to supplement the farming, or did they leave the farming behind?
Well, the farm was there with his 3 other brothers, so they were still taking care of the family farm. Somebody else moved on there who didn't have a family, and so he was able to just bring other workers in, and
so
that worked.
From Fox Valley to Medicine Hat. And what can you tell us about that? Now, you did tell me that you had there were 7 kids in your family. You were one of 7 children.
My sister was born 13 years after me in 1956, 6 years after we got to Medicine Hat. Yeah.
Can you tell me anything about your early years or your siblings' early years, any of those stories that are shared by families?
Do you know, I feel I'm so lucky that I remember everything from the farm. Like, I was 7, I was grade 2.
Well, tell us about that.
And I remember coming to Medicine Hat in the black Model T, and we got a sort of a shack on what's now Kingsway. It was 7th Avenue. And we arrived with 4 metal beds, a wooden table, 2 benches, 2 chairs. And this they bought later, probably about 1950, but it's really old. And yeah, and so the greenhouses were just starting up back then. And so the truck would come by Saturday morning, because we were all in school. The truck would come by, and 3 of my older siblings would get on the truck along with my mom. And they'd go out to the greenhouse all day, and they'd come home with money and vegetables.
Interesting. So which greenhouse were they working at, do you know?
They were Chinese, the people that had the greenhouses, but I don't know where.
Somewhere near town, though.
Oh yes, maybe even in town. I don't know, but I didn't have to go.
And you were this little kid at home.
Yes, I didn't have to go.
And were you preschool?
I was when by the time we got settled in Medicine Hat, I was in grade 3, and we had to walk up the hill from 7th Avenue, walk up the hill to Southeast Medicine Hat to Marion School.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Which school is that?
It was Marion School. It's not there anymore, but it was on 11th Street, yeah. And then in 1952, thank goodness, we got flooded out. I say thank goodness because it was like not a good home. And so then we moved from there to Elm Street to Queen Street to Yule Street to a small little house, small little house for us 8 people. And my dad said, oh, we're just going to live here for now. We'll find another place. My mom was there for 50 years.
We'll find another place.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So-
Well, she must have made the best of it.
Oh, she
I
did.
bet she had a wonderful garden.
Oh,
Because
she
the soil down there is amazing for gardens.
It is, and she did. She did. She fed us every vegetable that we needed.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the farm, where my dad's brother was still there, we would come home from school and there'd be a pig laying in our porch.
A pig laying in your porch. Not a live pig?
No. He was butchered and cleaned, and my dad wouldn't know that this pig was coming. I mean, there weren't any phones, there was just a pig. He'd walk in the door, and it was the only time that he ever did any cooking or anything in the kitchen. And so then the work would be on, like he'd that thing on the table and cut, cook. And it was in the freezer.
Well, I have to back up a little bit, Marianne. How did the pig get there?
My Uncle Valerian Weigel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
the brother
Uncle dropped off a pig.
The uncle dropped off a pig, yes.
Mm-hmm. From Fox Valley?
Oh, from their farm,
Yeah.
like from their farm at Fox Valley, yeah. From the Weigel farm.
So still sharing, still helping, still
Always.
very much family.
Sausage was made the next day, I think. They ground it up and put it in the fridge, because by this time, it was time to eat and get to bed and get up the next morning at 7:30 to go to work, But yeah, it was impressive.
So you went to Marion School, and then after that, now we're going to talk about about you for a little while,
Okay.
about your schools and your interests and so on.
Okay.
So can you bring us along in your memories?
Yes, when we moved to Elm Street then, we had to walk, 10, 15 blocks to St. Louis School.
Okay.
And that was the biggest school that we'd ever been at, because from the one-room schoolhouse in Saskatchewan to the small little school, Marion School, was really small. And then St. Louis was really impressive. 2 floors, and the nuns were there. We had mostly nuns, and so I stayed there till grade 8, and then I went to St. Mary's High School on the Southeast Hill, and that was amazing in grade 9 because the St. Pat's kids came from Riverside, and us from St. Louis, and there was another school. So all of a sudden, instead of having 6 to 8 friends, I had 30. Yeah, in St. Louis, all we had track and field, baseball, square dancing, and that was it. And then when we got to St. Mary's, there was volleyball and dancing.
Well, a gymnasium.
Well, in St. Louis, we had a nice gymnasium too. That's where we did basketball.
Yeah.
But it was in grade 9. Well, the square dancing grade 8, St. Louis, and then grade 9 there was lots of dancing at St. Mary's in that gym, lunch hours.
And I think you told me earlier on that that's where you met some of the people from the public school system.
Not in the school, but one of my friends who went to school with me there, she met 2 girls from the Medicine Hat High School. And she said, you've got to meet them. And so I did, and then from then on I hung out with them, grade 10 and 11. I hung out with the Hat High kids all the time.
And by now you're a teenager.
Oh, yes.
Am I right about that? Okay.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, the social side of your life was opening up.
Oh, and I had so much fun. Oh my gosh.
We did, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Now, are we talking about the 1950s, just to keep us...
Oh, let me see. I graduated in
focused?
61, 60, 59, 58. My fun started, 1958.
Mhm.
Yeah, at St. Mary's, like in grade 9. Yeah.
And so then, Marianne, you decided that you're going to do something with your life. And tell us about that.
Well, in grade 10, we were so fortunate that the Catholic school brought in a room full of manual typewriters. Previous to that, I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll be a hairdresser, you know, because I knew I wasn't going to be a nurse or a teacher, anything like that. I thought, well, I guess I can be a hairdresser. But then when I did really well on the typing, the bookkeeping, the office practice, that was all new.
Mhm.
They didn't have that before grade 10. So I took that 10, 11, and 12.
Mhm.
And I excelled, and I got out of school, and August 15th I got a job at a finance company, and I wasn't even 18 years old yet. It's wonderful. Wonderful, and that led to 30 years in finance, I guess, mostly banking.
Banking?
Banking, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was a perfect job for me, because I love people. I love people, I love talking, you know. So I was a cashier a lot of the times, bookkeeper in loans, you know,
Mhm.
where I sell people. And in school, I switched to a different math in grade 11 because I could not do algebra or any of that. But I could do banking, like 1 to 10, 10 to 100, whatever. I was really good at it. I loved it. Loved it. I
And
worked for Canada Trust.
this is
here.
all in Medicine Hat?
No, we left for 13 years.
You say we.
Oh, my husband, I married Gary Flug.
Oh, you met him somewhere along the way.
I did. I actually met him at the end of grade 9, and he was going to Hat High.
Mhm.
And in grade 10, he came over to St. Mary's, not because of me, but because his older brother had caused a lot of commotion at the Hat High, and so he said the teachers didn't like him. So,
Oh my goodness.
so he came over, but it wasn't until grade 12 that we went steady and then got married in 63.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And a family?
Yeah, we had two. Darren was born in 65 and Kelly Ray in 72, just the two kids. And 2 grandchildren, and I've just a few weeks ago become a great grandma.
Oh, congratulations.
Little boy, yeah.
So you were a working mom?
Oh, I was. I only had maybe 5 years where I wasn't a working mom. We moved from Calgary to a farm just north of Red Deer, where Gary went into farming with 2 of his brothers. And then I got to stay home with my daughter for 5 years there. Mhm.
Well,
I've had a very
how
full
interesting.
life.
You have indeed. And it's at this point that I sort of ask if there's anything else you would like to add to your story that I haven't thought to ask you.
Do you know, I made a few notes this morning.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think we're all right with the time.
Here.
So why don't you just
Okay.
share with us?
My interest in my family history started in high school social studies. I would ask my father, how did our Germans get to Russia and why? He said they got free land. My mom would often speak of the reasons their parents were forced to leave Russia. In 1990, a hardcover book was published, Stopler, Weigel, and Kessler Families. I will forever be grateful for the work done in Canada by Margaret Stopler Porosnichuk. Her mother was Barbara Weigel, married to Christian Stopler. Barbara was sister to my grandpa Valerian, born 1878. Someone from South Dakota gathered the Weigel information from South Dakota. I was able to reference this book to get me started on my Weigel family's history. That's my grandma and grandpa. I did their history 100%, all of their 12 children, their 10 children, like everybody's everybody's data. And there are websites in Alsace, and maybe someday I can go back further, because I'm at 1756, and I think it's amazing further. Yeah, and then I just have a little bit more over here. This past hour has been a reminder of how happy and comfortable all my families have been in their over 100 years in North America and Canada, because of the bravery and hard work of my ancestors. First traveling from Niederlotterbach, Alsace, Germany in 1808 to Selz, Odessa, Russia, where they created an oasis of good crops and orchards and villages. They were only there for 92 years.
Well, this has been so interesting for me because each person I visit with brings a fresh perspective. And I really want to thank you for helping us with our life stories. This is what we call our project, Life Stories. And so now we have, I think, one more item that we want to mention, in that there is a photograph you wanted to share with us.
This is a picture of my mom and dad's wedding picture on this side. And we teased her constantly because they weren't smiling, and she said we were told not to smile.
Oh. Well, maybe it was a long time exposure or something.
Oh, sure, with the camera. Yeah.
And do you know where they were when that picture was taken?
They were at the farm, the Bischoff family farm, just 2 miles from Fox Valley.
Wonderful. It's a beautiful picture.
It is. After I had typed into my computer that all of my aunts and uncles and cousins were born in Fox Valley, I found out that they weren't, that they were actually in the district of Happy Land 231, which was just on the other side of Fox Valley, just started a few miles past Fox Valley. So I had to go back in to dozens of names and change that. Happy Land.
I'd like to meet the person that named that location Happy Land. I think they must have been definitely an optimist. But thank you again, my dear. Oh, you have some more show and tell? Great.
I just wanted to show you this book on Alsace. We were only there for one day. Which is the only part of the trip that I wish was different. Like, we were in Berlin for 3, Odessa for 3, Stuttgart in 3, and then just one day in Alsace. I would like to have gone to the cemeteries. And 2 of our people stayed, they were twin brothers, Voller brothers, from Minnesota, and they stayed behind and went to the cemeteries. And he took pictures of the monuments, and there's 2 monuments still of Weigels there. And he said that means that there's still Weigels in the area, because every 30 years the family has to pay money to keep up the grounds in that, and if they don't, then the monument is removed.
Interesting.
So there's still 2 Weigel families there, so I might need to go back.
I think you should start saving your money. And you have a shirt there that you wanted to show us?
Yes. It
Journey
says
to the Homeland.
Journey to the Homeland. I can't even remember what it says.
Germany and Ukraine.
Yeah.
And then on the bottom, North Dakota. And then the flags, Canadian and others. German, American, and I don't know what that 4th one is, but it's a beautiful t-shirt.
It is, and so we wore these when we, just a few times when we went out. When we were in Berlin, we didn't see anything from Germans from Russia, except one night we were taken out for supper to the Germans from Russia building. And these are the people mostly that came from Bessarabia. That were brought there to fight in the wars and stuff like that. So they fed us supper and did videos of us. And they spoke to all of us. And my brother and sister-in-law were with and they had been there in 2013. And he said if I ever can arrange to come, he'd come again, so he did. So before I got to talk, I said, what I'd like to say is that this is my Bruder, Jakob Edward Weigel. And he said, okay, you can do that. Like it's James Edward Weigel, Jakob Edward. And I'd had a glass of wine, I guess. But yeah, no, it was good.
Well, I hope you do manage to go back.
I would like to. My daughter, I told her about Stuttgart, which has about 20 spas because they're on a natural mineral
Spring?
Yeah. And then I said we can go on a car over to Alsace, and then I can spend more time there.
Well, thanks again, Marianne Weigel Flug, for this visit.
Thank you.
I hope it was pleasant for you as it was for me.
Thank you. It was. It was.